Again. Now, Casey, we're sitting down today because you're about to drop a new project, Poetry and Pain. But whilst we're going to talk about that, I really want to talk about the fact that you've gone on an exceptional journey.
Yes.
You are a son of Neutrals.
Indeed.
You know, you've grown up there within Birmingham. It's not one of the brightest areas, let's say, one of the most affluent areas. And yet, you've gone on to be one of, I would say, the shining stars of not only the Midlands, but also nationally and now internationally acclaimed. You are a father and a husband, first off. And then you find the time to have gone from a teacher to becoming assistant head teacher, which is just amazing. You're inspiring young minds all the time. You're a published author. Mm-hmm. A poet, as we know. You've now got a doctorate.
Indeed.
I'm sitting down with Dr. Casey Bailey.
That's wow.
It's madness. I really want to know about your journey. How did all this happen? Because it's not the expected route.
True. Okay. That's a cool first question. Thanks for that nice intro. Sometimes I hear stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that. I need to sleep, boy. Yeah, do you know what? I think I have to, realistically, I'm very lucky. I grew up in a place that wasn't necessarily the ideal place to grow up in. And, as soon as you step out of the house, it is what it is. But I was fortunate that inside the house, I had parents who always showed love, were very strict, didn't really accept any nonsense, but inspired me in certain ways. So my mum was always a very enlightened person. So she was showing me things that people are talking about now and quite excited about around spirituality and around knowing yourself and understanding your roots and all that stuff. My mum was showing me that stuff when that stuff weren't cool to talk about, when it wasn't, nobody had the Instagram page dedicated to it. So I had that. But, I also had, when I was a kid, we had encyclopedias in the house. I sit in the house and just read stuff about stuff. And I enjoyed it. And so even when I was outside the house getting involved in this or that or whatever I was doing, my mind was always geared up for something more than that. And I think that what I've realised as I've grown up is a lot of people I grew up with, their parents kind of endorsed their bad decisions. So I was making bad decisions, they were making bad decisions, but they could just come home in their bad decisions comfortably. Yeah, this happened. People were like, okay, cool. I couldn't do that. So I was always being taught what was right, what was correct, what was the right thing to do, what was the right way to move. And so when the time came and opportunities became available for me to do different things, I was already prepared for them. Whereas I know a lot of my friends have seen the kind of journey that I've been on and even some of my siblings have been on, and will kind of go yeah, I want to take that route. And then they get in a position, but they're not ready to handle it because all they've ever known is one thing. Whereas, in my little house in Neutrals, you almost wasn't Neutrals. Do you know what I mean? So when you step out of the house, you were prepared for more than one world. And interestingly, weirdly, there's a line in one of the songs, what my parents provided for me was more precious. I'm built for love, I'm built for war, I'm built for all measures. And that's kind of where that comes from. So then, yeah, I scraped through school. It was an interesting time. And I always say I was lucky because if I went to any of the schools that I've taught at, I probably would have been kicked out. But I went to a school where the scale was so severe. They had other people on the list. And I was at a school where the percentage of GCSEs, 5A star to C, was so low that they openly told me they had to take that into account as to whether they would permanently exclude me from school or not. They were like, we actually kind of need you to get these results for us. So I was lucky in that respect. Went to college. Again, it was a bit of I did 3 years at college instead of 2 years at college because I got kicked out of some courses in my first year. It was bumpy. And then from university, I guess, the rest of that side of the journey, the academic, the teaching, and all of that is relatively smooth sailing. I think I said early on in my teaching career, we look at experience. It's how many years have you been doing something? And when I came into teaching at 21 years old, I understood stuff that a lot of people who I knew who had been teaching for 20 years didn't understand. And so you can't train that, and you're not going to learn it in the classroom. I learned it somewhere very different. So, yeah. And then, so that was that. And then at some point I started writing poems. I've always written music, always made music. I used to walk around in the street, yo, it's me. Everybody knows I'm KCB, year 1 at school, trying to get a band together. Really, I just wanted backing vocals, you know what I mean? Like everyone trying to be like, you're not a star, I'm a star. But now, so yeah, it's a mad. I'm going off on all kinds of tangents because it's just a lot, innit? Like,
it is a lot. You're one of the most energized people that I know. Sometimes I think, the amount of stuff that I see you doing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, makes me feel lazy.
Nah, man, never that.
It's completely mad.
That's actually, by the way, that's wild coming from you because you do a lot, You do a lot,
Well, that's why, I'm kind of like here to catch up with your story and your journey and just to let you talk.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Because I think it's nice that we get to hear the inside track, especially when, it's nice to know things like you weren't a golden boy at school. It's nice for people, I think, to hear that because I think knowing that people aren't perfect
100%
helps to inspire.
Man, listen, my journey's riddled with all kinds of mistakes and things that I wish I never did and things that I shouldn't have done, things that I knew I shouldn't have done at the time. Some of them things I look back on and go, man, why was I doing that? And this is one of the things that I found when I deal with young people is I meet people at 15 years old, 16 years old, I'm too far gone. Do you know what I mean? There's no way back for someone like me. And I look at, if you only have to look at, older people in the city who have been through all kinds of stuff and are now on whole different tracks in their life. And I would class myself as one of them, where you go like, you're never too far gone. There are people out there now who have done all kinds of stuff, spent long stretches of time in jail or in different kind of situations, and are now fully functional, doing well, living life. So I think that's, for me, one thing I would like people to take from that is like, you're never too far gone. Like the question is, are you willing to go through the rough patch out of your comfort zone to do something that's actually better or to live in a way that you feel more comfortable and happy? And it's not easy. It's not easy. But it's worth it.
Out of interest, at what point did you make that decision for yourself? What age were you when, were you 15 or, older? How far gone were you when you thought, actually, I need to turn it around?
Weirdly, I think people who have known me for a very long time will remember when I used to the people who I ended up kind of rolling with and being friends with and falling in with, I spent a lot of time kind of telling people not to be like them. And then certain things happened, which I, don't too much detail. And then I kind of felt like, and I still feel like it now, they were the only people who, when the chips were really down for me, they stood up. And nothing that we did in that time was correct or right or advisable. But I needed something and I needed people, and those people were there. And so then I went for a bit of a period of kind of spiraling, falling into all kinds of stuff. But I think for me, because of that, and the kind of point I'm making about how I was before, is always underneath the surface was an idea of more. So a couple of things happened. There was somebody who was like one of the biggest and most well-known kind of people in the area who did whatever he did. And I sat down with him once and he just says to me, like, I don't know why you're here. And I was like, what? And he looked at my friends and he says, I can understand why they're here. I don't know what they would do if they weren't here, but I don't understand why you're here.
That's pretty
And
epic.
I was like, and he said, so like in the nicest way. These days we'd say respectfully, but he basically dropped a 2007 or 8 version of respectfully. I don't want to see you around here. And I was like, he says, if you need something, then I'm here. Like, but I don't want to see you around here. Like, you shouldn't be in this kind of environment. And I was like, that's kind of mind blowing, because what was weird about it. And what I found really challenging about it is he's in that environment. So in a way, it's almost like he's saying, you can do more than me. And he's the guy that everyone in the room's looking to, like, you're the guy. So I was like, that's a bit wild. So that was a big moment of change for me. But I think there's a lot of seeds that my dad had planted growing up as well. And my dad would say stuff like, sorry, Dad, little exposition here of Dad. My dad would say stuff like, if you're going to be a bad man, but be the baddest man you can. And he never meant that. But what he was
Yes,
saying
Dad.
is, don't think you're going to half-heart this thing and then you're going to want to back out later or it's going to go wrong later. If this is what you're doing, go on then. And it was almost like a challenge, and I had to accept and really sit down with, is this what I actually want to be? And it wasn't. And I was going to say something there that I don't really need to say. I got nothing to prove on this little platform. It was a decision that I made that actually that's not the way I wanted to live. So there we are. And yes, so maybe around about, I went to university. I was still back and forth a bit in my first year of university. And a friend of mine passed away while I was at university, my friend PV. And I kind of had a bit of a different spiral of like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this life thing all about, man? Because I've had a good couple of my friends pass away, and they're like 19 years old, 20 years old. And at the time, I was like, I didn't think about what I was doing tomorrow. I mean, I still kind of, in a way, don't. But I wasn't valuing tomorrow. I wasn't putting any value on the fact that actually I have days beyond today.
That you can build a future.
And my friends don't have that. And so sometimes when I feel like I can't be bothered or I don't want to do it, or like I feel like I'm trying to live more than one person's day, because there's people who should be here to do that as well. So yeah, man, we have to pick it up and carry it.
Amazing. Last year was a big year for you.
Yeah, man.
I feel like every year's a big year for you.
It's been a few years now.
But last year particularly, you released Please Do Not Touch, which was a kind of reaction, really, to going around to all those stately homes and, you know, national trust places and with your children, with your young family, and having your son want to engage with the artefacts and then not being able to.
Yeah.
And that kind of feeling is, you know, informing the work that you're doing today.
Absolutely.
But just talk about Please Do Not Touch, because that was published with, was it Burning Eye?
Burning Eye, yeah. So Please Do Not Touch, it was very much a response to me, it's like the wild hypocrisy of like, if you go into Tatton Park National Trust House, they've got this big glass case, and in it they've got these Somali Afro combs carved from one piece of wood that somebody's took their time to create. Somebody else has took their fast hands and picked it up and moved it. And then they've got a big sign on it saying, please do not touch. And there's someone looking through that glass who's got so much more right to touch that than the person who put it there. But you're going to tell me not to touch. And I think, like, if you just please did not touch all around the world, we might be living in a very different world now. So don't be please do not touching me now that you've troubled up everything. It's like that kind of like thing when you're kids where you have like your brother or your sister will mess up everything and then tell you, no, don't do that. I mean, you already mashed it all up, man. You know, it's gone now. It's too late now. But now you want me to have some respect for it and look after it. And so it very much is that, like, how can you tell me not to touch something that you never should have touched in the first place, never should be in this room? And the more, it's funny because it started as an idea for a poem. And the more and more I went around these places, I was like, there's so much. And so some of the collection is a response to the idea, and some of it is a response to specific things. Like there's a poem in the collection called trompe-l'oeil, which is like a phrase about things appearing as they're not, or basically that kind of thing. And it's about this massive picture at a place called Charlotte, and it's got this white guy all dressed up in his nice regalia. It's got a horse, and it's got a black boy with a metal collar around his neck. And in the information that they gave out at the time, it says he's a page boy. And I was like, we're going to have to call the young brother a slave, you know, because it's disrespectful to the whole legacy of what's going on there. They can just pretty up the whole thing like, oh, this is such and such, and he's page boy. And that sounds really nice. That boy's got a big old collar around his neck. He's chained up worse than a horse. So we're gonna have to actually say that boy's a slave. Because if we're not, then what are we doing? Do you know what I mean? And that's the whole thing is, it's all decorated and they control the story, they control the narrative. So when we look back 200 years, 300 years, you're getting sold this packaged product of, it's like Instagram before Instagram. Do you know what I mean? They're putting filters on everything.
That's so true.
The whole thing is like, you know, when people say, don't believe everything you see on Instagram, don't believe everything you see in the National Trust. Yeah. Because they're selling you this dream of, oh, these people went round, there's an exhibition.
They were so civilized.
Lovely people. There's this exhibition about how this guy went to somewhere in Africa, and he took over this farm, and he allowed the people whose farm it used to be to work the farm. And I'm like, he allowed them to work on their farm.
It's outrageous, isn't
And
it?
that's how they sell it. And some people sit there and go, oh, that's nice. Because then they had a job. Bro, they had a farm.
They had a whole life.
They had a farm.
Yeah,
It's like me coming up to you and saying, I'll give you £10, I'll give you back 10 pence. You're like, oh, that's generous.
crazy.
So, and we're like parallels. So I always think, what are the parallels between those people and how we talk about them? And then people where I grew up who have directly been affected by the racism and the substandard that has been created. So where I grew up, people rob each other's phones, and someone will rob your phone and give you your SIM card back so you don't lose your numbers. That's like letting a man work on his own farm.
Nice.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Look, man, hey, look, I still want you to be able to call your mum. You just can't call her on this phone. So it's like but we would look at that. Anyone would look at that and go, that's disgusting. You know you're making a negative impact on someone's life, and you think it's good because you've given them back their SIM card. But when a man lets a man work on his own farm, oh, he's so generous, benevolent.
Yes, benevolent. Great word.
Do you know, what a lovely man. I'm just like, nah, not for me, thanks. Take the filter off there. There's a problem, yeah.
So your latest project, Pain and Poetry, like just coming off the back of Please Do Not Touch and feeling that kind of energy that you have and that emotion about stuff. I'm really intrigued about the title, Pain and Poetry.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and this is the case for everything that I work on, because I'm always working on something, like there's always an overlap. So I couldn't tell you now which one I started first. I have Please Do Not Touch and Pain and Poetry. But they definitely inform each other. And when I've come back so I spent a lot of time like with the concept of pain and poetry there, because I had this commission from Homegrown 31 in 2020.
Okay, just when things were good.
Yeah. So, interesting time. And so at the time, I had a clear idea of what I wanted it to be. And going through the writing of Please Do Not Touch and the writing of the play Grind Boy and some other stuff, it kind of got pushed into the back corner. Some of the stuff that I unpicked while writing Please Do Not Touch, kind of within society and within myself, when I've come back to pain and poetry, I'm like, actually, I'm more angry about that than I thought. I'm more unhappy about that than I thought. I'm more joyous about this bit than I thought. Because even like one of the reflections that I had when writing Please Do Not Touch, I read Caleb Femi's book, Poor, which is just like the one of the best poetry collections you could ever want to read. But he speaks about growing up in Peckham, and there's so much joy in it. And I remembered, actually, I reflect on Nechells as this place where there are issues and there are problems. I was a very happy young man in Nechells. Yeah. Every day of the week, happy. Me and my friends were living life and enjoying life. And so when I reflect on it, I didn't want to reflect on it like, oh, it's all sad and depressing, because that's not the reality that I experienced. And so when I've come back then, after that kind of epiphany, back to the music for pain and poetry, I'm like, yeah, there's pain, but let's not, it's not all pain. Let's not, brush over the fact that actually we had some good times.
Yeah, you had a smiling childhood.
Absolutely, like 100%. And so then the idea originally of the project is it was going to be some music, some spoken word poetry. And a lot of the stuff that I write, I kind of joke in the poetry scene that I've developed a reputation as like the happiest poet with the most depressing poems. And so a lot of what I write is quite severe and quite like, and it's a bit on the nose. Some poets don't like to be so on the nose. I like to write poetry in a way that nobody should feel like I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't like to veil the poetry too much. Sometimes it's nice to have a little metaphor and to play with like an extended metaphor of like, is that about this or is that about that? But on the whole, I like people to feel like they kind of know what's going on, which, can be controversial or whatever, but there we are, it's life in the fast lane. But so for me, when I came to writing the music again, it was very much the same stuff. It's very much reflecting on the loss of my friends, the loss of my mother. It's reflecting on difficult times that we saw, that we didn't invite, we didn't ask for. So where I grew up, we didn't, people, I'm not going to reference a recent podcast where somebody said a thing that they said, but people kind of look and go, well, if I was in that situation, I'd just do this. I'm like, that's mad. Like, you have no idea how wild that is.
Yeah.
Because once you get into that situation, it's bonkers. It's like, have you seen those? I'm Mr. Analogy today. I don't know why. Have you seen those videos of the guy who does the self-defense stuff? And it's like, it's how you disarm the person with the gun or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah,
Chicago
yeah.
defense, whoever they are. And it's like that. Like if someone puts a gun in your face, you just take the gun off them. And that's like the equivalent of going, like, if you grow up poor, you just will your way out of it. Yo, that's wild.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds beautiful. Like,
We all have the same 24 hours in a day, guys.
oh, she did it. Uh-oh. So yeah, it's that kind of like, that sounds great, it sounds beautiful, but in reality, when, I remember being quite young, probably a school holiday, sitting next to my mum, who was working in like, I guess like a factory, like a workshop type setting, and just sitting there all day, just putting these 3 pieces of metal together. And that's somewhere down the line that's going to become a part of a machine or whatever. And she's not getting paid a lot. And I'm there because she can't afford to have someone look after her kid and do what she needs to do. And she's just grafting, just all day long. And that was never going to make my mum rich. It was never going to make her a millionaire or whatever, but it paid her bills, it looked after her kids, it put food on the table, it put her in a position to be able to provide us with more than she had at the same stage. And so for me, that's where the magic is. Like, there's no glamour there, but that's where the magic is, because we're living in a generation, and I'm part of that generation, where you can turn into a millionaire overnight, but most people don't. That's the thing that people forget. They're like, oh, look, I did it. Yeah, and while you were turning into a millionaire, like, hundreds of people were killing themselves because their life was horrible, because they didn't, and because they were chasing what you have. And where I grew up at a time where my parents were trying to survive, now it's like people can have £50,000 a year job and they're depressed because they ain't got £100,000 a year. And because the man on Instagram's got a Lamborghini and they ain't got the Lamborghini. And so for me, I want to unpick all of that in the music. I don't want the music to just be like, hey, hey, bop, bop, bop. Because that like, I love that kind of music. It's just not, I'm trying to say something.
Yeah.
Every time I open up my mouth, I want to feel like you listen to it and went, oh, I don't think about it like that, or yeah, I understand that, or even I don't understand that. So Pain and Poetry is about how do we get that message across, but also not lose sight of the art of lyricism and properly rapping, and there's no mumble rapping, there's no like, I say it because it sounds nice, I say it because every single word is meant. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it, I think.
Nice. You clearly had a really good relationship with your parents as well, and just talking about Pain and Poetry and the things that have kind of inspired you to get to where you are today. You've had some big losses in your friendship circle.
Yep.
I kind of want to know about losing your mother a little bit, if you don't mind me asking about that. Just like, how has that affected you? Clearly, it's going to be very emotional, but I wonder how maybe having that happen has inspired you to do better, to become better, to move forward.
I think in many ways I'm really blessed. Like, I've worked with young people who've lost their mum at 14 years old or 10 years old, and I wonder who I would be now if that had happened in my life, because my God, I was not in a regulated place to handle that kind of situation at the time. I think I'm lucky in that my mum, like, she did more, she gave me more in the 20-something years that I had with her than most people get from anybody if you have them for a lifetime. And she did that for a lot of people. There are a lot of people whose lives are so much better for the fact that my mum was in their life. And so in many ways, whilst the loss of my mum is like brutal, it hurts, at the same time, like, it's almost like she did what she needed to do. She'd already done what she needed to do, for me in particular, before I lost her. And so I've got lessons that my mum taught me 15 years ago that are relevant tomorrow, the next day, because I know how to deal with this. I know how to address that. And my mum was like the warmest, most loving person, but she was cold. Like, don't mess with her. Like, don't ramp with her. So for me, like, there are situations where someone will say, oh, can you help me with this? And I'll help them. And people say they always ask for your help, man, and they never give you anything back, or you can't trust them to. And I'll always help them again, and I'll help them again. And people don't understand why I'm like that. That's what my mum was like. That is exactly who my mum was. if you then take the mick with me, so not with things, like I'm not connected to things. You call me up and say, Casey, I need this, and I give it to you, and you can't give it me back, that's not going to affect my friendship with you, because I genuinely don't believe you would do that. If you're in a position where you could give it me back, you would give it me back. So I don't stress about stuff like that. When people disrespect and take liberties, or they do something that I know is wrong, then I have to front it out and call them out, because that's how my mother raised me. So you can't violate, like, we're not taking any violations. And that's like, I learned that on road with my friends, but before I learned that on road with my friends, I learned that in my house with my mum. And anybody who ever tried to violate, it was addressed. And so I learned that from my mum, but also I learned how to love, I learned how to look after people, I learned how to appreciate what I have, enough that if I can, if I've got a crumb, then we can try and make 2 crumbs out of the crumb. But some people got a whole slice of bread talking about I ain't got a love yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that, I was very lucky in that sense. Having said that, because of all of that, I crumbled when my mum passed away. There's a song that isn't on the EP. I'll probably never pull it out, and it's just about my mum. It's all about my mum. There's a song on the EP that very closely references my mum, but this song is just all about my mum. And I don't know if I'm ready for my family to hear it, and I don't know if I'm ready for anyone to talk to me about it. So that's why I can't pull it out, because I feel like if I pull it out and someone says, "Oh, that song where you say this," I'll be like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna cry now." But she was a superhero. Like, it's really hard, because this is gonna sound like such a wild thing to say. Like, everybody feels like this, don't they? Like, well, not everybody. I know for a fact not everybody. A lot of people feel like this about their parents. Oh, my mum's great, my dad's great. And my mum was an extremely special individual. It's very hard to quantify what I'm talking about, because we all think, oh yeah, my mum's great. Oh, and my mum. No, not like my mum. And so, and I mean that because there are people who she wasn't their mother. She had no reason to do for them what she did for them, and she did it for them anyway. And she moved from being that woman who was in that factory putting together pieces of metal, to doing a job which was called print finishing, to running her own print finishing company, to having the ladies up and down Nechells running with shopping trolleys up and down the road with boxes, because they was working for my mum, and she was making sure they had employment, and she was telling them how to do their taxes when that came around, and telling them what's the threshold. You don't even have to pay tax because you've only earned this much, or you don't have to worry about it. She's like educating the people in our community. Like, that's who she was. And people say, "What does your mum do, man?" People are coming to your mum's house with boxes and stuff. I'm like, "Don't worry, man. Don't worry. She's not, she's not supplying the streets, man. Don't worry." But that was who she was. That, like, and she would never. She wouldn't walk past and make somebody get treated incorrectly, or something bad happen to someone. The kids who I grew up with, who are my friends, and I've got love for them. There's some of them I don't see or speak to anymore, but they might come to my house, knock on my mum's door, sit down, talk to my mum for 2 minutes, and they knew my mum was going to give them a little bit of money. And she didn't have enough money, but that was, so for some of them, that's why they were there. Okay, that's the reality of life. And she knew that. She's not an idiot. She's a very clever woman. But they could have that, because why are they there if they don't need it? So she was always on beat with people. Like, I've never met a better person for dealing with people than my mum. And that, some people call it naivety or too nice, and I don't buy into that. I don't know if you can be too nice. I don't know if that's a thing. People like to think it's a thing. I don't think it's a thing, and that's because of my mum. So yeah, and when it's hard, in a really selfish way, I guess, when it's hard is when I'm standing on stage and someone's talking about me getting a doctorate, and I'm thinking, oh, I wish my mum could see that. That's tough.
So just rolling back to Pain and Poetry, you mentioned that you'd been commissioned to create this by Homegrown 31.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of relationship come about? How did you approach them, or did they approach you? What was it?
So I think I'd already done a bit of stuff with them, and I became aware of Homegrown 31 because some people who I used to teach were doing some artistic stuff with them, some very talented individuals. And so I kind of started following what they were doing. I was thinking, they're doing some good stuff, man, and they do very good stuff. And they were doing they were putting on things that it's always interesting for me when I see things from their inception. Similar thing with Amplify, what you're doing. Because as we grow up, we like see things that are established and they're happening. And you kind of don't know how they become that. And you think you couldn't do that again. Like you couldn't be the new this or that. Because how does that become a thing? So I imagine kids now growing up looking at like Link Up TV and SBTV and GRM Daily and thinking like, whoa, look at that platform.
Yeah.
And I remember when those platforms didn't exist. And when I look at Homegrown 31 and what they've done, but I wasn't old enough to understand how those platforms came to exist. When I look at Homegrown 31, I'm like I remember when you first started doing stuff, and I never thought you'd be doing the stuff you're doing now. And that to me is inspiring. And so when they put out this opportunity for a commission, it was there were a number of commissions available. They commissioned some amazing artists, and I just thought, I've been messing with the music again. I was kind of dabbling with it at the time, and I thought, I often do this, like, because I do so much, like, I honestly feel like I would have recorded this music at some point, and I would have wrote this music at some point. But in this way and altogether like this, maybe never. And it was almost like if they accepted my application for this thing, then this was going to get done. But if they didn't, it would happen in a very different way. And so that's how a lot of my projects go, because if they'd said no, I was still busy.
Yeah.
So I could go, okay, I'll focus on the other 6 projects I'm working on. So it was very much like, yeah, I'll throw my ring in the hat. And what I asked them for was the money to be in a position to record my own stuff, to try to learn how to mix and master and do all that stuff, because what I wanted was that commission to be sustainable. So my actual practice has changed as a result of it, not just I've produced a thing. So like, hey, I've got this commission, come and see this show. You've seen the show, it's done. I wanted it to be like, you know, if you hear a song from me in 5 years' time, that's because of Homegrown 31 and this commission. And I think that's powerful.
That's good legacy.
So, and not to mention, because of that setup, and then we kind of went into lockdown, all kind of voiceover work for Audible on audio books, or radio work, all kinds of stuff that I've now been able to do because of that commission. So it's not only just allowed me to create this project, it's just allowed me to level up as an artist, as a practitioner, as a creative. It's put me in a different realm. So big up Homegrown 31.
When's the project going to drop? Because you're always so busy. I'm going to come on to like stuff that you're doing, you've got in the pipeline this year as well. Because I didn't mention before that, you know, you're a playwright.
Yeah, that's a bit weird, isn't it?
Ding, 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 ding. I'm like, what can't Casey Bailey do?
Play
Sorry,
football.
Dr. Bailey.
Play football. Ask anyone who's played with me. Casey's starting. Oh, man.
So yeah, like when are you going to release it? Because I know, you know, you've been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
When are you going to like share it with the world?
All things being well, it is going to drop on the 31st of January.
That is soon.
Soon.
Are you ready for it?
Hell no. I'm never ready. It will. If it doesn't drop on the 31st of January, we won't make it through February without seeing the project. So it's coming now.
Okay, cool.
We're in the delivery suite as we speak.
That's such an image. Touching on the other projects that you're working on. As I say, you are literally one of the busiest people that I know. Just always doing stuff, always producing stuff. You mentioned Grime Boy earlier. This is something that really excites me.
And me, I'll be honest. And me.
Like, I'm going to be there front and centre for this play. I'm excited. I've heard little whispers about, you know, casting and stuff, and I'm 100% down for this. First of all, obviously you're a poet, you write music. Then what made you think, you know, I'm going to just like bash out a play?
This is not my fault. This one, I'm not responsible for this one. First of all, I got somebody that I knew had some funding, a guy called Mikhail, who's a very talented beatboxer, and he was putting on this show, and he basically asked me to create like a new piece of work for the show. It wasn't like a very specific brief, whatever. So I was like, okay. And we spoke about how much it would pay, and I was like, that's a nice amount to get paid. And I thought, I must have had more time on my hands then than I have now, because right now I probably would have just thought, what do I already have, and how can I tweak it? But I said, I'm gonna start trying to write this one-man show about the version at the time was meant to be like my journey through being a kid rapping on the playground, to being a grime MC, to being a hip hop rapper, to being a poet. And it was supposed to tell all those kind of like elements of the journey. And the bit that I wrote was this grime bit, like 10 minutes of like being in a grime rave. There's some MCing in it, cool. Then the opportunity came up to do something called Poetic Theatre Makers. Okay. So that went down really well when I performed it at this project, at this performance. And I was like, cool, okay, that's good. And there was a couple of guys who I knew. One was a grime MC called Axel Jackson, one of the baddest grime MCs in the country, in my opinion. Like, people can't spit like Axel Jackson, facts. And he was there, and I spoke to him about it, and he was like, yeah, but like that was cold. Like, and I'm thinking, that to me, a lot of people get caught up in like, names and this and like how many followers does this person have. To get that from him, who I know is a cold MC, but B was there. The time I'm talking about, he would have been the man standing shoulder to shoulder with me while I was MCing. And he was killing it then, and he's killing it now. So I'm like, yeah, if you rate it. And my brother Dobbs was there, and Dobbs was like, yeah, I like that. And Dobbs is a very creative guy, also was a cold MC. So I'm like, yeah, if these men are rating it, there's something in this.
Yeah.
So then I had the opportunity to sign up for this thing that was put on by Apples and Snakes, who's the biggest spoken word poetry organisation in the country, and the Birmingham Rep. And it was sent to me by someone called Anne Holloway. Anne Holloway, big up Anne Holloway, a hero in my life, who published my first book, Please Do Not Touch Your Madman, Casey, waiting at Bloomsbury Park. And what I love about Anne, and Anne again is another just generous, amazing person. She sent this to me, and she sent it to another poet who she published called Chris McLaughlin, who is just a phenomenal poet. And she applied for it herself, and I got on it, and Chris got on it, and Anne didn't.
Oh, wow.
And it would have been easy, and I see all the time people like, hug that idea. Let me keep that over here, because then I can have it. And she didn't. She said, hey, you would be good for this. You would be good for this. And we applied, and we got on. And I felt really fortunate and blessed that she'd done that.
That's really generous of her to do that.
She's just amazing. Everything she does is generous. She just provides. For like the whole Nottingham poetry scene has got a lot to give back to Anne Holloway. Big up Nottingham as well, always. So I went on this thing, and I had this plan. The plan was simple: create a one-person poetry show, stand up, do some poems, do some MC, breeze off. Lovely. It's a well-recognised format with some MCing thrown in. Everyone knows what they're doing here. This is good. And I had these two mentors, Chris Thorpe, who is like, his theatre practice is just like outside of the box at all times. And so he's one of the first people who I was like, well, is this right for theatre? Is this how theatre works? And he's like, theatre's going to work how you make it work. And I was like, oh, okay. And then had Somalia Seaton, who's just an awesome practitioner, who just asked me questions that I was like, and sometimes it was like, when she first asked the question, I was like, I don't want you to ask me that question, because now I have to answer it. It was like, why have you done that like that? And it felt quite, but I go away and think, why did I do that like that? And in theatre was my first experience of proper challenge like that.
I was going to say, did it feel good to be challenged?
I love it, because for me, someone's going to come and watch the play. I want it to be the best it can be. All the other stuff in the middle, I don't care about. Break me. We can break me if we're going to break me and make this play. Because if I'm doing something that's wrong, or not wrong because of what's wrong, but if I'm doing something that doesn't portray the message that I'm trying to portray, or doesn't give the audience what they need from it, someone needs to tell me that. Like, otherwise I'm just going to go through, make whatever I was going to make in the first place, and it's pointless. So Chris and Somalia were like instrumental in getting me to actually think about what it means to do theatre. And then there was Alia Hasina, who was like leading the program. She was producing the program. Who is just, if anyone who knows Alia knows, she's just bad. She's just a legend. And she said to me, like, there needs some dialogue in this. I'm sorry, Casey don't write dialogue. Casey's just writing for Casey to speak. She's like, yeah, we need some dialogue. And I said, I don't know. And she said, try it. Just write it. And I just write it. And then if you don't like it, you just don't do anything with it. Now we've got this play. I think we've got 4 actors in the play. We've got all kind of stuff going on. I'm not going to be on the stage, thankfully, because I'm not out here trying to remember all the lines and that. Actors, hold tight actors. Yeah, you guys are skillful. So I just I just got pushed and pushed and pushed in the best way possible. And I think that's another kind of learning point for me. Don't protect all your stuff and I don't want anyone to see it, or I don't want anyone to have an opinion on it. Let people tell you stuff. Because even now, we just went into the research and development rehearsals, and there's an actor and theatre practitioner called Corey Weeks, and he sits in a room and we're going through and he's a very, very talented rapper as well. We're going through the script and there are lines and it's just like that. Nobody would say that. And I'm like, no, you're right. They absolutely would not. And this script has been seen by other people. They've had their eye on it and they haven't caught that or haven't caught this. And so many times he's like, why are you doing that like that? Good question. Good question. So them kind of people will only make you better.
Yeah.
And will only make the thing better. So yeah, Grind Boy, April, Birmingham rep.
Yeah. And that's not the only one, is it?
No, so...
Because doing one theatre production is not challenging enough. Just go and do another one.
I need help, you know. I need counselling or something. I don't know what I'm running from, but I'm running fast.
I'm kind of not worried. I was thinking before. I'm like, how's your wife? Does she get to see enough of you?
She's amazing.
Yeah,
Do you know what?
She's another amazing woman.
That's what she is. She's amazing. I think that actually what I don't do, which a lot of people my age do, is I don't really socialise. I do socialise, but I socialise while I'm working. So if I'm going to do a poetry event, I love the poets in the poetry community in Birmingham, and I love the poets in the poetry community in the country. So if I'm performing in Liverpool, there's a poet there that I know, and I'm chilling and I'm having a good time, and I'm like, yo, this is sick. If I'm performing I'm going to perform in Leeds soon, there's going to be people there, I'm like, I ain't seen them in a year. And my friends who I grew up with, who I came up with, I see them here and there. Do you know what I mean? There's an event we're going, but I don't once a week go and kick it with the lads at a bar or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I'm at home with my wife and my kids.
Nice.
And a lot of what I do, it's only really the delivery that requires me to be outside the house. So I'm writing 2 plays, but I write them in the office upstairs. Do you know what I mean? So if a nappy change needs to be done, I can come out and change the nappy. Yeah. If somebody's crying for dad, then I can come out and do it. We need to build some Lego, we can build some Lego. If my wife wants to talk to me, then she's allowed. But so it's kind of I'm either in my house or I'm working almost all the time. Which I'm not mad at, because my favourite people are my wife and my kids.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
So we're here, we're good. Nothing can replace that kind of time. So yeah, bless her. She's amazing.
She's a saint.
She
from
is
what
amazing.
It sounds like.
I mean, just putting up with my antics is enough. Never mind.
Because you've been together for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So I met my wife when I was 16 years old.
I'm gonna call it proper childhood sweethearts.
100%. 100% without fail. And when I think, and I probably didn't do it justice earlier, because when I think about my journey, I also don't know what that journey would look like without her. And people people romanticize this idea of see potential in a person, pick someone for potential. Thankfully we're not doing we're doing a podcast in the UK, but we're not talking about relationships and dating. God. I don't know if that's allowed. But this whole pick potential. My God, my wife just picked up one scruffy, and just was like, oh, it's funny, and I had to ask her to be my girlfriend a lot. But in the end, persistence breaks resistance.
She caved.
She gave me a chance. But I would imagine, she would never have envisaged that we would be where we are. And I never envisaged that we would be where we are, which is in a really good place in our lives. But whether we look at it from a support point of view, a financial point of view, a happiness point of view, it's all been built together. So even when I talk to my friends and they say, I'm doing another UK podcast trophy, I'm talking about finances. Even when I talk to my friends about buying my first house, I couldn't just buy a house, but me and my wife were both teaching. It wasn't a big, flashy, expensive house, and we scraped the money together. And again, my parents allowed me to live in their house for 12 months after coming back from uni. Because we were together, we could do that. So I've got friends who are like, I don't know how you got your first house. And I'm like, bro, with respect, when I bought my first house, you was just running around partying in Brum. Not to knock them, but like, you didn't have a secure relationship.
Different priorities.
So you weren't coming into it going, I couldn't afford that. She couldn't afford that. We could afford that though. So that's how those things have come to pass. And that's not by plan or design or like, how do we be couple goals or how do we mastermind the perfect relationship in this society? It was like, yeah, I love you. Like, you're pretty cool. Let's do this. So I think that just naturally and organically is built into, you know, if I'm stressed about something, my wife sees what most people don't see, which is when I've got a project that I'm ready to release or I'm ready for it to go out or I'm ready to send back a commission and I'm like, I don't think this is good. Like, I don't know about this, man. And then it goes out and people are like, oh, yeah, I like it or whatever. I'm like, I told you. But at the time, I'm like, yo, babe, this one's the one that's going to end the career. Like, they're going to hear this and go, like, you never book him again.
It's the bit, isn't it? It's just the bit before the jump.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't matter all this stuff that you've done. And I'm like, when they hear this one, they're never going to want to hear from me again. And she's like, babe. And then somebody sends me back saying, hi, Casey, no notes from us. Thank you. We're ready to put that commission out like that. I'm like, oh. All right, cool. I knew that. I was confident with that. So, yeah. She's
Teamwork.
a boss. She's a boss. She's very talented. She's like, so the EP cover, photograph taken by my wife. EP, the design done by my wife. So all the artwork for the cover was by my wife. The front cover of Please Do Not Touch. The handprint is my son's handprint. The artwork then created by my wife. The artwork on the front of Please Do Not Touch, Way in a Bloomsbury Park, my first book, was done by my wife. The last EP I put out, which was Progression, the artwork was done by my wife. So she's also an extremely talented individual. She just don't like to be outside as much as I do.
For me...
Also, who would look after the kids?
That is true.
We both do it, but, you know, sometimes I'm out performing and she's there with the superstars at home.
Yeah. It feels like, you know, people talk about a lot about teamwork. And I was thinking that you've obviously got a really strong team bond. But it's not only that. From what you've just told me, you include her in what you do. I find a lot of times people operate in silos and, you know, kind of have their glory, have individual glory, but you seem to work on things together. Obviously, you can't do everything together, but the way that you include her and bring her into stuff makes her part of your success.
Yeah.
So.
And I think with the EP cover, I'd actually paid someone to do some artwork for it. But I just wanted it, like, and I didn't know what we were going to do at the time when I said to my wife, would you do it? I just wanted it to be done by her. Like, I just want to say, oh yeah, you know the artwork's, like I just said, the artwork's done by my wife. That's why I wanted that done, like, in a weird way. So
that's cool. That's really cool. That's really nice.
So yeah, she's a boss.
It's the best kind of, beats like flowers for Valentine's Day. Although I'm sure you've got to do that.
Oh, she gets flowers. Flowers are a must.
Okay, so like rolling back to the plays.
Mm-hmm.
Second play is also coming out this year.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, we've
well.
got to cram everything
this
in.
Half of the year as well. This 6 months is going to be wild.
So we got Grind Boy dropping in April.
Yeah.
And then you're also doing Please Do Not Touch at the Vault.
Wow, the Vault Festival has now been cancelled, unfortunately.
Okay.
But we think we know where it's going on. But then my producer, Jade, who is a legend, is working on a couple of things. And so it's almost certainly going to be on in February in London for about a week. And it's like a theatre adaptation of the book. So I wanted to, when I wrote the book, and this is a similar thing with Grind Boy, like, so many people access different things in different ways. And so if you just like, so if I just make a song that I just want to make this song, that's fine. But if I make a song and I think there's a real point to that song, I might write an essay about the same thing. I might write a poem about the same thing. I might do a video talking about the same thing. And so with Please Do Not Touch, the book did so much that I wanted it to do, but I also wanted there to be another kind of forum for that, or another vehicle for that message. So the play is basically, it's centered all around the poems from the book, and it's the story of a young man who is in jail for stealing one of the combs from Tatton Park that I spoke about earlier. And he is unpicking what this all means, and he's writing poetry. exploring this journey that he's on. And the reason he's in prison and the parallels that we're painting is somebody else stole that comb. They didn't go to prison, they got an exhibition in their name.
Yeah.
Why so? So,
are you going to be performing in this play, or are you handing it over again to
no, so
to
when
the
I did,
actors?
the biggest thing I learned when I did Poetic Theatre Makers at the Rep, right, is, so Apples and Snakes and the Rep put this program on, and everyone started off with like this thing that they were going to be in, and it changed throughout time. And I loved doing the scratch for Grime Boy, acting as Grime Boy. That was cool. It was cool. But on the day when we come to do the big showcase, I'm in there and I'm like, okay, you know, get myself. I got to get this right. I got to nail these lines and whatever. I'm talking to my friend who's on the program, and I'm like, are you all right? And she's like, yeah. How come you seem so chilled, man? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, how come you seem so chilled? You just no stress, whatever. She's like, I'm done. I'm like, what do you mean? She's not acting in it. So now she's just going to sit down and watch the showcase.
Yeah, she can just
I
watch
was
the
like,
people.
oh, really? This is the trick. So now I'm going to write it, yeah? And then somebody else is going to act out, and I'm going to sit in the audience and smile. That's the plan.
That is a good plan. Delegation.
Yeah, man, somebody else. And if I'm honest, I can do a lot of things, and I do a lot of things. But, you know, I also do not take any of those things lightly. So, like, acting is not like, I can get up there and say, I can say the lines. I can kind of get them across. But when you start talking about proper acting, some people are going to go up there. So I remember in R&D, again, Corey Weeks, who is just a great actor, he read one of the scenes, and I'm tearing up. I wrote it. So I know this scene, do you know what I mean? Like, I know this scene like the back of my hand. And I'm sitting there like, how is he doing this to me? I understand if somebody else is seeing it and they don't know what it's all about. But I'm like, yo, because that performance, once you get to that level, it's different. So, yeah, I'm kind of going to sit back and...
I'm sure we'll be sitting down again in about 2 years' time, and I'll be like, so you're acting in your first movie?
No. Might do a cameo, you know those ones. What's that, Casey?
But you actually have done a bit of stuff for Peaky Blinders, so you're kind of treading, you know, in that direction in some respects. Like, how did that come about?
New stuff coming for Peaky. What? Nothing. Spoiler alert. How did that come about? They just contacted me. The BBC just contacted me, and it was weird because I'd met Stephen Knight, who writes for Peaky Blinders. I'd met him twice at that point, and we'd spoke, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to like somehow maybe do something with your case." And I'm like, "You're Stephen Knight, so relax."
Yeah, that's a huge name, isn't it?
I was terrified.
Huge name.
And then they contacted me, and I thought it was through that, but at the time it wasn't. And I think what was one of the biggest compliments I've ever had, like as a creative, as an artist, they said to me, you know, we'd like you to write this poem talking about what's happened in the last 4 series of the show, blah, blah, blah. They gave me the brief. And I said, who else do you have in mind? You know, try and scout out, you know, this is Peaky Blinders, you know what I mean? Like, I want this. Who else are you looking at? And the woman who I spoke to said to me, oh, no, Casey, it's not, we don't want a poem, and then we've come to you. We've seen you and decided that we want one of your poems.
Oh, wow.
I was like, for the Peaky, excuse me, in case it don't cost on the interview, for the Peaky Blinders. I was like, that is wild. And then that led to all kinds of like cool stuff. So I did the Peaky Blinders Festival.
Fans are really fanatic, aren't they? Can I just say?
Yeah. So I'll tell you something in a
dressed
second.
up.
Yeah.
Did you have to like?
I
get the
didn't.
hat
You know what?
on
I'm so
stuff?
bad. Like I showed up in like jeans and a t-shirt, and people are like, "You're performing." I'm like, "Listen, I'm a reckless."
Did you get the memo?
I'm a reckless individual. And actually, Route 36, hold tight, Route 36, who are doing all of this that's happening here.
Amazing.
Route 36 actually followed me for a couple of days because I had a workshop in Canterbury. So I had a performance in Dudley at the Black Country Museum for Peaky Blinders. Then I had a workshop in Canterbury the next day, so I had to drive down to Canterbury. Down to Canterbury, like, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours, some mad drive. Then do the workshop until about 5 o'clock and get back on the road and come back for the next night at the Black Country Museum. And then the next week we did the Peaky Blinders Festival in Digbeth. So I was just all over the place. And so I didn't have time to be dressed up like a Peaky Blinder yet because I got 3 engagements today. Do you know what I'm saying? It's all good me showing up here in a peak cap, but when I go to do my workshop, the kids are going to look at me funny. So I was dashing about. But on the second day of the Peaky Blinders Festival in Digbeth, or maybe the first day, one of the days, we were sitting in the VVIP, which we managed to hustle our way into. There's a story there that I will tell at a later date. And Stephen Knight's there. I'm like, huh. And he's like, oh, you're right, Casey. I'm like, yeah, I'm all right, Steve. I'm all right, mate, how are you? And he says, a bit later on, oh no, he didn't say, somebody came over and asked me. A bit later on, Steve's going to go on at the poetry stage and read from his mother's journal. He's asked, would you come on and share some poetry as well? I'm like, what? So I'm up there on the stage. You've got Anthony Byrne, who directed the last season, directing this season, might have directed the third series, or the fourth series. Like, so big, huge director, Anthony Byrne. He's like hosting it. He says, oh, I just want to introduce you to Stephen Knight and Casey Bailey. And I'm sitting there like, and it's just like surreal.
Yeah.
Very surreal. And maybe I say the biggest compliment I ever had is when they told me they just wanted my poem. I said to Stephen, I introduced my dad to Stephen Knight, and I said, sorry, Stephen, this is my dad. I don't know why he would care. I'm like, Dad, this is Stephen Knight. And he said, your son's an awesome writer. And my dad said, oh, And I said, well, you write the Peaky Blinders. I just wrote the poem. And he said, no, what I do is like beer. There's just lots of it. What you do is like whiskey. It's distilled. I was like, what you just said is better than half my poems. What are we doing here, Steve? What are we doing here, Steve? I was like, oh, man, why can't I do a good compliment? I'm like, no, Steve, but it's very high quality beer. I was like, what?
Oh my God.
I was like, man, that was Stephen Knight just said that. And he walked off, and my dad looked at me like he was impressed for a moment. And then he remembered that he's my dad, so his sole role in my life is to bring me back down to earth. He's like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's all right, thank you. That was the same day he met Andy Street, the mayor of the West Midlands. He said, did you know your son would be the voice of Birmingham one day? And my dad said, I always told him his mouth would get him in trouble. Fair.
Nice one, Dad.
So that came about really like quite organically. They just saw what I was doing. And I said, I did a keynote speech at a poetry event recently. And I was like, that doesn't happen if I'm not a Brummie. Like, granted, you could say, oh, no, Casey, we think you're really good or whatever, but I'm not delusional. Like, if I'd been the exact same poet from Manchester and you're looking for the Peaky Blinder poem, that doesn't happen. And I said that because we were talking about why stay in the Midlands? Some people want to run off to London and chase the opportunity or whatever that they believe is there. I'm a Brummie, so I'm going to be in the Midlands. Like, I'm not in Birmingham at this moment in time. I'm very, very close. But, like, for me, like, this is where I want to be. This is like my creative hub. Like, I don't want to know what the up-and-coming singer in Manchester's doing until they reach my ears, but I want to know what Dimes is doing today. I want to know immediately what he's doing. I want to know what Daps and the Map is doing before he does it. Like, I want to know. Yeah. I want to know these artists, these Birmingham artists are like, that's what I want to tune into at all times. So that's why, for me, being here, and then also it has provided those opportunities. I don't do the Peaky Blinders poem if I'm a Leeds poet. Like, if you wanted a Leeds poet, you could have got Matt Abbott. That would be mad, could you imagine? Probably would have wrote a better poem. There would have been an uproar. Yeah, right. So
riots across the city.
So it's like, that was cool. That was nice.
But I do feel like now, I'm throwing it out there. Casey Bailey is going to be acting on Peaky Blinders, okay? I'm just saying it now. Mark it in the sand. It's going to happen.
Don't listen. But interestingly, speaking of their fans being fanatics, one of my favourite stories that I will tell now is I was on the way to India, and I was in Qatar airport, and I had this Peaky Blinders T-shirt on that says, I've heard some very bad things about you Birmingham people. And this guy walks up to me with an Irish accent. I won't do my Irish accent. It's very good, but I don't want to offend or upset anybody. And he walked up to me and he pointed at the T-shirt and he went, Peaky Blinders, right? And I looked down and I went, yeah. He went, and you're the poet. And I was in the airport in Qatar. I was like, yeah. He's like,
wow.
He's like, it was really good. And he just went. I was like, I'm in like...
Yeah.
I'm all the way around the world, and a man just stopped and pointed at me and said, oh, you're the Peaky Blinders poet.
That is nuts.
And somebody else came to do my sky, set my sky up at my house, and he was looking at me like really weird. I was like, why is he looking at me like this. When you got a backstory like mine, Alex, you don't know if someone's looking at you because they want to fight you. So I was like, okay, where do you know me from? In the words of Stormzy, where do you know me from? And he shook his head, and he said out loud, he went, no. So then he starts fiddling with this guy after he set it up, and he brings up BBC iPlayer, and he goes to the poem, and he like presses it, and he looks at the screen, and he looks back at me, and he goes, it's you? But, I know. And that was like surreal, very surreal. So yeah, Peaky Blinders fans are Peaky Blinders fans. I'm a Peaky Blinders fan, so I'm like, yeah, I hear that. Yeah. I respect it.
So all this stuff is happening, all this amazing stuff is happening. Music releases, theatre productions, book releases, more poetry coming out. Like, we've spoken about how busy you are. But in your day-to-day, you're obviously also an assistant head teacher as well. So what's going to happen? Because I think that's an amazing job. It's a really seriously important job. It's one of the leaders in the community, and I think you're really strong about kind of giving back to the community and inspiring the community. Do you think you're going to stay in teaching, or are you kind of just going to wait and see what happens?
I think, at the moment, I can't see myself leaving teaching. Somebody would just, and this is only purely because of my wife and my kids. Someone would have to I would have to earn a ridiculous amount of money in one go to leave the profession. It would only because I kind of wouldn't be able to justify the time that I spend away from my family if I kind of absolutely didn't have to work. But I know that if I did my writing and I went into schools and did workshops, I would earn considerably more money than I earn now. And I don't get paid badly. That's not a dig at what I earn. But people pay you a lot more money to come in for one day and be that poet who wrote the Peaky Blinders poem and is Birmingham Poet Laureate. Can you come and do a workshop? I can't, because I'm actually at school. But what I find is, and when I've done those workshops, they're really powerful, and I love doing them. But there are students who I work with for 5 years, and after 5 years, I wish I had another year or two with them, because there is a process and there's actually a group of young men who I now mentor. I haven't spoken to them in a little while, the Unlimited Gang. But they are boys who I taught. And I left the school that they were at, and they left the school, and they're now, a lot of them are at university and doing different things in their life. And I still check in with them and catch up with them, because it's a lifelong commitment for me that those boys do well. And so I can't get from going in and doing a workshop today what I can get from spending a year, 2 years, 3 years. And some of the students that I work with, as I mentioned, as I touched on earlier, we're talking about people who have lost their parents. We're talking about people whose life hasn't gone the way that they want it to at this stage. And some of them will believe like there's nothing for me, and they're 12 years old or 15 years old. And I was that kid. I was that kid at 14 years old who was like, I'm going to be here doing the kind of things that I'm seeing around me forever. And I kind of wasn't even worried about it. It's like, I'm just going to be out here on these nature's roads forever. That's it. That's the plan.
That's just life right now.
And so, the impact that you can have, you can't measure that. You can't put a value on that to say, well, if I could earn an extra 10 grand a year being a freelance person going into people's schools and working, would it be worth it? Absolutely not. Not a chance. And sometimes I have funny interactions with students, because they in their head, everyone's just here because it's their job. And I know for a fact, for a lot of teachers, that's not the case. And for me personally, more so, I would say, than anybody I know, that is not the case. This is so important, because I know when I was at school, there were teachers who, they stuck their neck out. I know that Casey Bailey is a royal pain in the backside, but, however, can we also consider this? Yeah. And that was a blessing for me. That was a privilege to have those people who, and some of them, I'll cost them out on Monday, and I'll see them on Tuesday, and I go, "You're right, Casey." And I'll be like, "Nah, do you know what? You're a very serious individual," because I would have been like, "Don't ever speak to me again." And now that's who I am aspiring to be for those young people that I work with. And there's kids that I work with who will say to me, "Sir, I hate you." And they'll walk off, and they'll come back the next day and say, "Sir, I don't hate you. I'm like, yeah, I know you don't hate me, man. I ain't worried about that. Even if you did, we're cool. So, yeah, man, it's powerful. It's the most, other than raising my own children and being in my own house and my own family, it's the most rewarding thing that I do. Like, and it's the most challenging, and it's the hardest. Some days I come home and I think I never got through the way I wanted to today. And the education system, just like every system and structure, has its flaws. And so there are days when I've come home and I've been like, that should not have happened today. And the way it went wasn't correct. But I'm not in enough of a position to change it. And I might never be. That's one thing I had to accept. You know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago in my career where I thought, now I'm in this position, I can say this and this and do this and this and I can make that happen. And you realise sometimes you can't. That's hard. That is hard. But then that makes the fact that you're there more important, not less important. And I get why some people go, if I can't affect that change, I don't want to be here. But for me, I'm like, if I can't affect that change, I have to make sure everything else goes right for those kids.
I'm just thinking about your doctorate in education as well.
That's wild, you know. Every time I hear it, that's wild.
Dr. Bailey.
I call myself Dr. Bailey on one of the songs on the EP.
Do you?
Rude.
Yes.
Rude. Who do you think you are?
Yeah, just like, you know, saying about you, will you stay in education? Would you leave education? You know, you're now a doctor of education. And so, you know, maybe does that sort of give you the opportunity to elevate where you are or to sort of progress through?
I think...
Basically become a lecturer, you know.
Yeah, I think so. So I think it's something I've considered, the potential of becoming a lecturer. I think interestingly, you know, a primary school teacher will tell you that primary is the most important point in education. A secondary teacher will tell you secondary and et cetera, et cetera. So I think when I was younger, I saw the idea of somebody being a lecturer as being like more than a teacher. But now I just see it as a different lane more than a different level. I like the idea of lecturing because I think that I love academia, really. That's the real reason. I like secondary because you're shaping minds as they are being formed. And I kind of have convinced myself that doesn't happen at university, even though I know it happened to me at university. So I'm lying to myself. But I think that, I came out of my degree. I did my teacher training, postgrad. I did my master's. I started a master's that I didn't complete because somebody else would fund my master's, but I had to start it at another institution, so I had to do the work like twice. I've done like all different professional qualifications in teaching. I love academia. I'm a bit of a geek.
Love it. It's those encyclopedias, isn't it, from the start?
This is it. And my son's got encyclopedias now. We're like, hey. And he tells me stuff. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, Dad, do you know that the Mariana Trench is the deepest part in the ocean? I'm like, you're for? You know you're for it. You're the deepest part in the ocean. And so, like, I love it. So I do think I would really appreciate being in that kind of environment where it's not just... there is a thing in schools where a kid will ask me a question, and the question's a great question, but I also know if they run down the road that the question's taking them, they'll get the exam wrong. And it's that balance of like, that's not wrong, but don't ever say it again. So it's like, and I think there's more scope for actually, if you form that opinion at a degree level or at master's level, if you form that opinion, as long as you can back that up, you can say something very different to the person who sits next to you. Yeah. You say, that's not my opinion. My opinion is this, based on this, this, and this. And I think one of the things that we've been tricked into, and I think people, a lot of people who don't engage with higher education, which, people can do whatever they want realistically, but they think that you go to university and you get taught a thing. So when I leave university, me and the person next to me leave university thinking the same thing. And what we actually did is we spent 3 years finding out what we think. And him going, I think this, and me going, you're wild, and the girl over there going, no. Yeah. Why do you two think that? Surely it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm like, can't be in the middle. You got to pick a side. And we come out and we go out into the world, and we could do the same job and do it in entirely different ways. And as long as I'm confident that this is why I'm doing it in this way, then if somebody wants it done in that way, they'll ask me. But if they want it done in another way, they'll ask her. And that's best, that's fine. And so there's there's that trick of like people thinking, you know, you go to school, you get taught one thing, you go to university, you get taught one thing, you come out and we're all robots, and like, you all went to university, you all think this. I'm like, well, I don't
Yeah,
think
it's
that.
not the case.
I don't buy into that at all. So that's what I like about that higher level academia.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because what age do you teach at the moment?
11 to 18-year-olds.
Oh, I'm going to say the challenging years. They're all challenging years, aren't they? If they want to be challenging.
I would say that these are the challenging years. Yeah, that's why I do it.
I feel like they're the decision-making years, aren't they? Because you've got a lot of choices ahead of you. You're becoming a young adult, and when you're at school at that age, your form tutor, or whoever, your homeroom tutor, whatever we call it now. They're like an extension of your family.
Absolutely.
They're like another parent.
Yeah.
And you always have that favourite teacher at school that kind of guides you. I'm sure you've got like the Casey Bailey fan club.
Nah. I'm also in charge of behaviour, so nobody wants to like me. I don't like him. He's making all the rules around here. Look at him with the rules. Why can't I wear my hoodie?
I can imagine that there's whilst people are like hating on you for not letting them exercise their fashion rights at school, I also imagine that you're a very inspiring person to have around.
I've got some very good relationships with my students. I believe in them wholeheartedly, even when they don't believe in themselves sometimes, and they're just amazing. I can forgive kids anything. Like if you're under the age of 18, there's very little I couldn't forgive you for. We'll work on it. It was a mistake. Like everything, like because they're just. I've met very few kids who've made mistakes worse than the ones that I've made as well. So I'm like, if somebody had wrote me off at your age, this might have been a different story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do they know about all the stuff that you do and you're doing?
Some of them, yeah, like in different ways. At my current school, actually, more than ever, like the kids at my current school are like private investigators, man. These people are on the ball, man. So
everyone's on the gram now, aren't they?
This is like when I very early after I got there, they're like, so did you make this song? I'm like, what? Already? Normally it takes about 6 months for people to work out this stuff. So they have some understanding. But that's kind of always been the case. I was at a school in Great Bar, and I was walking down the corridor when I got the Birmingham 30 under 30, and kid, oi, Bailey. That's a nice way to greet your teacher. I turn around and I says, what's up? He says, I saw you in the newspaper. I said, did you? He said, yeah. He said you were young, and he just walked off. I was like, oh man. It just destroyed me.
They just always know how to blaze you, don't they?
Destroyed me. Must have been another Casey Bailey. So yeah, man. So they pick up on stuff, and they're aware of certain things. I don't think anybody who I work with quite knows how much I do. It's a lot to keep up with. Sometimes I don't know how much I do. So when people say to me, oh, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, I go, oh, yeah.
Mental checklist, yeah.
Deadlines. I just got a planner, big new planner, to keep track of everything. And my goals for January, over here in a little thing, I wrote buy flowers. That's, I think, the only one I've got ticked off yet.
That is cool.
Priorities.
That is priorities. Yeah. I had to invest in a giant wall planner that I now stuck up in my lounge, and it's like, everything has to go on there now.
I need one, but my wife won't let me put stuff like that on the walls.
Not in your lounge.
Ruining the decor.
But you can have it in the office, surely.
Yeah, I'm changing the office around at the moment, so we need a big wall planner in there.
So just going back to Pain and Poetry. Obviously, the big release. We've heard that it's going to be out now, dropping on the 31st of Jan.
Yes.
So that's like
soon.
16 days time.
Yes. I just looked on my watch to check if that's correct. That is correct.
That is so correct. That's my quick maths coming in there. So yeah, like, first of all, favourite track of the EP? Come on, you've been working on this for a bit of time now. So what's like really resonating with you?
I've got like a favourite track and like a favourite moment.
Okay.
So my favourite track's called Wishing. I just changed the title of it quite recently, so it's called Wishing. It's quite an emotional song, but I feel like it fully did everything I wanted it to do. Like if you said to me I couldn't put the EP out, I could put out one song, that would be the song that I think would be like, this is where I'm at. And then my favourite moment, there's a song called This Road, and the young young Teflon fans will know, back in the day, he used to, hey, what you say, youngs? What you say, youngs? On every song. And there's a line in there, I used to walk everywhere, now I'm missing my steps. Headphones on and I just listen to Tef. Hey, what you say, Case? Headphones on and I it's a little nod to the fact that, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about, top 5 rappers and this list and that list.
Yeah.
And people who don't know Tef and what he did and what he's doing, they don't know bars, man. So I had to do that little, it's like a little salute to a legend, so yeah.
Nice, a nice nod there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, what are your hopes for it as well? Like, because like you say, everything is about lists nowadays. I feel like the what we hear in the mainstream charts is very compacted sound. Everything is about TikTok.
Yeah.
Have you planned your TikTok campaign?
There's no TikTok. Ooh. There's no TikTok. What's the Mozzie line? There's a Mozzie line. I can't remember it. Mozzie's got a line where he disrespects TikTok, and I felt like after that line I could never, ever, 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 ever go on TikTok.
Have you checked to see if he's on it?
But anyway, yeah, I'll be on there February. So I think my hopes are, it's weird because it's going to sound like quite dismissive of what I'm doing. Like, I kind of don't want anything from this project. I was always going to make this project. I was always going to record these songs. I'm always going to record music because I love music. Like, music's my first love. I made music, which I am very conscious of. It doesn't exist in the charts. And you only have to look at, you look at the Brit Awards or the Mobos. I'm trying to think of which award ceremony I'm thinking of now. And you look at, Governor B. Governor B is not in the best hip-hop category or best rap category. Like, the Bittersweet album that he made, that album is better than most people's albums. I don't care what anyone says, right? I'm not a Christian. I don't subscribe to Christianity. I listen to Governor B, I feel like I'm closer to God. Do you know what I mean? That man is rapping and he's making music that is powerful. But it's not going to go into the mainstream charts. That's fine. He knows who he's making that music for.
Yeah.
And they listen to it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I know there are a world of people out there who, just like me, I love hip hop, and I'm sometimes listening to music that I am politically opposed to half of what he said in the song. But I love the musicality, I love the lyricism, I love the energy. And so I'm listening to it because I can't find that with the message that I want to listen to, or I can't find it very often. So I'm trying to create something that if you sit down and you go, yeah man, I like rap, I like rapping, I like proper rapping, but I don't want to hear about, I'm going to buy this and sell that and pick this up and do that. I don't want to hear all that.
Mix that, yeah.
Then there is. That's what I'm creating. And some people will listen to it and go, I really like it. Some people will listen to it and go, it's not for me. That's blessed. And if, somebody called Alex wants to book me to perform at Amplify Sounds again, I'll show up with the music.
Always.
So yeah, man. So I kind of just want to, and I like being a part of, and I'm only a periphery kind of part of, but I like being a part of the Birmingham music scene. I like the fact that you might put Lady Sanity on your playlist and then you might put one of my songs on your playlist. That makes me smile. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm at. And if somebody listens to it and goes, oh my God, that's amazing, cool. I hope they don't try and give me a record deal because I ain't got time.
Don't even
Casey,
utter those words.
We want to give you a record deal. I'm so sorry. I'm actually doing a late detention, so I'm not available at that time.
Casey, you're playing the O2.
Oh gosh, only if it's half term.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I don't. It's not. I'm not planning world domination with it. I just want to put it out. And I think the beauty of the time that we live, and I think people have missed this. Because people don't really analyse anything, they just say stuff. Part of the reason why we can have so many people can be successful and blow up is that streaming has changed the game in that.
100%.
There was a time when it was I remember when there was the big 50 Cent and Kanye West were both dropping their albums, and it was this big thing. And the reason it was a big thing is because, and people tried to compare the Drake and Kanye West thing to it this time with Donda and Certified Lover Boy. The reason it was a big thing is that you like me, I had £15, if £15.
Yeah.
I had to pick an album.
Absolutely.
I had to go in the shop and go,
every Saturday morning, every Saturday, you go and buy your piece of music.
Do I want the 50 Cent album or do I want the Kanye West album? Now, with the streaming, You know, you can listen to Donda for 3 days and listen to Certified Lover Boys the next 3 days and pick a couple tracks off each. And
Yeah.
you know, you only paid your £10 this month, or your £7 this month, or if you're free and you're shuffling through, then you're free and you're shuffling through. So for me, it's there, and I love that because people people don't have to commit to my music. They want it, they can listen to it. When they don't want to listen to it, they don't have to.
It's kind of good and bad in some ways.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking about when you were saying about, you know, you got to pick your music. It's kind of frustrating, and it is really important as who you did buy that weekend, because you couldn't preview anything.
Absolutely. And it's why very little lasts as well. It's why music's on such a quick turnaround, because when I got the Nas Stillmatic album, I never had a new album for about 2 months. So I had to listen to the stuff I already had, or I was listening to Nas Stillmatic.
That's when you listen to every single track on all albums.
Over and over again, run the song back, let me start one mic from the top again, because this is cold. Whereas now, you could be halfway through the album, and it's not a bad album, but you're like, okay, I want to listen to something else.
Yeah.
I just switch it off. And the amount of times now, I go back to songs like 5 years after. I said when Donda came out, I was like, Donda's trash.
Donda's like my Bible right now.
I said, Donda is trash, right? Me and my friend Rob had a big thing about it. And I was like, Donda's trash, man. And I'm not a huge fan of the album, but there are songs on that album that I just dismissed offhand because I can just skip and I don't have to come back, and there's another album out, and I was listening to the Sue Surf album at the time, which is better. And now people are saying to me, yeah, but if you listen to this song properly, and I go back and listen to it, I'm like, yo, this is a banger, how did I miss this one? Because it's like we're not in that kind of, we don't drink in music like we used to drink in music. It's just like, skip that. This album's all right. The man said Donda 5 times on the intro. I was like, this album's trash.
Yeah, I know. He's like, oh. You know what, though? I still don't sit through that one.
No, nobody listens to that one.
But interestingly, as an artist as well, the way that music is changing, because just giving the example of Donda. So he released that, and then a few weeks back, kind of like slipped in a few new tracks in there as well, and kind of restructured it. Yeah. And that is a nice ability to have, I think, as an artist.
It's more
as well.
fluid. Everything's a lot more fluid than it was. You know, everybody's got the like, and I think when you see like some of the Dulux albums, I often think that what's happened is you've really wanted to narrow this album down and get like, you know, your best, strongest songs because you want it to land. And when it lands, and it lands heavy and people really mess with it, you're like, they would have liked these ones. Why didn't I put these ones on anyway? Yeah. And then we go, let me give you another 5. Let me give you another 5 songs. And like for me, I'm like, yes, give me them 5 songs, please. Because always when I really love an album and then somebody drops a Dulux version, like I think Blast did Blast is one of my favourite albums in the last few years. Yeah, No Love Lost EP even. And then he did the Dulux, and it had like Chosen with a T.Y. Dollar Sign on it. I'm like, yeah, you Blast. If you want to do a Dulux,
I'm in.
We're here, okay? You can do a Dulux version every year with 3 new tracks, and you don't need to make another album again. So yeah, I like that. That kind of, you know, once you can kind of get that little approval and go, yeah, do you know what? 14 tracks is nice, but maybe you would want all 21. We do.
Okay.
We want all 21.
So
you ain't getting 21.
Pain, I was going to say, it's a Pain and Poetry.
There ain't no Dulux version coming. Boy, I need to sleep. Just going to drop it
with the first few tracks. And then maybe towards like Christmas, we'll drop the Dulux version.
Dulux version. Oh, man.
I love catching up with you, always.
Always a pleasure and a blessing.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we've had so much time today, because I know, you know, I mean, we've spoken about how busy you are. It's ridiculous. But I'm just also so proud of you. And it's probably like weird for me to say it because I've only met you recently, but even in the short time that I've known you, you've inspired and pushed me along my journey. Okay. And so the people that have you, does that make sense? A tongue twister. The people that have had you in their lives for longer, I can't imagine, you know, or I can only just imagine what effect you have on them.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, as I say, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I think you're an inspiring person, husband, father, doctor, playwright, musician, you know, author. The list goes on. As I say, I'm sure that this time next year, or maybe in a couple of years' time, we'll be like actor, Peaky Blinders. Yeah. So yeah, like, thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
And I can't wait for the world to hear the first version of Pain and Poetry.
Due luck to next. And big up Homegrown 31 for their support on it. Big up Route 36 for us being here, being able to record this.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.